My name is TJ. I am the Director of Partnerships at the Elections Group. For anybody who is joining us for the first time, the Elections Group is a nonpartisan election administration consulting firm made up entirely of former election professionals. We support current election professionals through collaboration, thought leadership, and elevating best practices. As folks who have all worked in elections offices, we know firsthand the challenges that election professionals face, and we use that real world experience to help folks solve challenges. You are not here to hear from me, but rather from our excellent group of panelists. Today we have Matthew McChrystal, who's the Operational Readiness Manager for the Ohio Secretary of State, Corrine Duncan, who is the Director of Elections for Buncombe County, North Carolina, Ryan Chu, who's a Senior Election Expert here at the Elections Group, and Mike Moser, who is the Principal at Moser Solutions. I want to give folks just a quick opportunity, beginning with Ryan, to tell us who you are beyond your title. We actually have our next panelist as well, Carolina Lopez, who is the Executive Director of the Partnership for Large Election Jurisdictions, who just joined us. Very exciting. I want to turn it to Ryan and then go to everybody else to give quick intros on who you are beyond your title. Go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. I'm Ryan Chu, a Senior Elections Expert with the Elections Group for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I worked 30 years off and on with the Cook County Clerk's Office, which is all of suburban Chicago, about 2.5 million people, 1.6 million registered voters. And I'll pass off to Matthew because he's next to me in the Zoom.
Perfect. I'll take it. Matthew McChrystal, Operational Readiness Manager here at the Ohio Secretary of State's office. I bring about a decade or so of crisis management and emergency management experience, working most recently at the Ohio Department of Public Safety's Emergency Operations Center. Prior to that, I've got about 10 years of public safety in some different areas. I've lived through a few real-world disasters, and I'm usually called the zombie preparedness guy, and earlier I was coined the zombie unicorn guy, so I'm looking forward to sharing what I got with you.
I said unicorn because I think Matthew is like the perfect example now of someone who is very well versed in emergency management and is now working directly with a state elections office. So yes, you are our zombie unicorn guy, though I just said unicorn. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, hey, it is a pleasure to be here and chat with everyone today and joining a great group of panelists. Mike Moser, as TJ said, I actually own my own consulting firm for election officials now. And prior to that, though, I was with CISA's Election Security Resilience team for a few years. And before joining CISA, I was the Director of Election Security and Technology at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, working with our 67 counties and certainly state partners as well. So glad to be here, and I will pass it to Corrine.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Corrine Duncan. I'm the Director of Elections for Buncombe County, North Carolina. That's one of the largest counties in Western North Carolina. I've been in elections for 10 years, and I feel like I have got my badge for running presidential elections through crisis. I started as director in 2020, and then I'll tell you a little bit about our flood experience last year.
Carolina?
Carolina Lopez, former election administrator in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Not a jurisdiction that ever had to deal with hurricanes or anything of national significance. And in recent years, I have the great pleasure of being the executive director at Pledge, which is short for the Partnership for Large Election Jurisdictions. And it's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization where we, similar to what we're going to be doing today, talking about best practices and making sure that our continuity plans are meeting current and emerging challenges, and some really good people. It's always great to be in unison with people that speak our language, right? So I'm kicking it back to TJ. I'm so happy that we're doing this today.
Amazing, amazing. Corrine alluded to this, but she is going to share a set of slides that speak to her experiences as the election administrator in a county that was deeply, deeply impacted, tragically impacted by Hurricane Helene almost 1 year ago. So I'm going to throw it to Corrine to show those slides, talk to us a little, and then we'll go to our normal Q&A format. Corrine?
Share my screen here. Can everyone see that? Oh wait, not yet. Click the button.
I can see it. I can see it.
Fantastic. Okay, so again, I'm Corinne Duncan from the western part of North Carolina. And I am going to share this slide deck pretty briefly so that we can get to the Q&A, but the hope is that it'll kind of get our thoughts flowing about emergency management. And I am going to go fast, but I did want to give you my main takeaway right off the bat so that that doesn't get lost in the flow. Elections are the biggest event that's going to happen in your jurisdiction. You're just as important as any other major events like concerts or dignitaries giving speeches. So you need to work with your emergency management team to prepare. And they will help you if you put it in that especially. Ryan Cole, who is the emergency manager at my county, and I work together, and we try to make everything as simple and efficient as possible. We do small monthly meetings. We do a briefing at the high level to get buy-in from people. And then we do a table talk. And that's really where the magic happens. That's where people come together. We learn what each other's skills are, and we really know who to go to when the going gets tough. So what happened for us? So this is a photo of the storm that came in and camped out in our region as a result of Hurricane Helene. And like TJ said, this was almost exactly a year ago. We're preparing for a lot of commemorative events right now. And this event is really, really rare. So in 1916, we had a similar set of forces come together to bring a big flood, but that was a 100-year flood. This one here was a 500-year. The images that you'll see next are just kind of displaying some of the effects that happened. Give you an idea of the level that we were at. So rescue crews were out right away. This is my favorite music venue, the salvage station. And it is not going to come back. There were also other things that were kind of less expected. You think of flooding around rivers during events like this, but when there's hurricanes in the mountains, when there's that level of precipitation, you get mudslides. And we had thousands of mudslides just in Buncombe County. And that provides a whole other level of issues that you have to deal with. So what do you do when you end up in one of these situations? I think when it's happening to you and you have elections to run, the biggest thing is to not panic. So remember that you've prepared, and that's something that was very, very valuable to me that I experienced through this, is that people will come together to help, especially if you've made those relationships beforehand. People are thinking about you even if you can't communicate, which we were not able to. So you're not alone when something like this happens. You also need to start with taking care of your basic needs. So make sure that your people are safe, that they have food and water and shelter, and of course, a place to use the restroom. My staff of 50 only had one porta potty for weeks. That was fun. So also be prepared to go old school. We did things in person, we did them on paper, and we used radio. The next thing that we did that was kind of right there in the aftermath was to compile what our issues. So for us, it was major lack of communication, altered transportation routes. We had limited ability to get supplies in or out. We lost polling locations, voters, and of course our poll workers were displaced. Like this frog, he was also displaced. There were all kinds of animals that were popping out of the river from being disoriented. So get together, make your plan, do your best. It's not going to be perfect, but you'll find that kind of taking that action leads to more action and you'll just recover more quickly. And everything becomes a resource. So you kind of need to open your mind and think about all of the things that you have. Data is real. I wanted to put this slide up here because the kind of picture in the background that's blue and yellow is the floodplain maps that were available to us previously. And then this little dot right here is where this picture was taken. And that's through these two buildings that are in front of it, where you can see that water line in the photograph is exactly where the water line from the 500-year flood was. It was pretty amazing. So make sure that you are kind of aware of what risks are in your area. I think a 500-year event was not something that that we would have thought of, but data matters. This is a reminder to make sure that when you have an event, especially if it's a regional event, that you're thinking of who your partners are outside, because the partners inside are very, very, very taxed. And so we were able to coordinate with the state emergency office and the state emergency management team to get these mobile emergency structures. They had generators, they had water, they had portable restrooms. They were very, very effective in those places where where polling locations were not available. And then be communicating the entire time. Keep people informed that planning is happening. Let them know the plan when you have one. Keep it clear and simple. We changed our early voting plan to be 9 to 5 every single day, just to keep it simple and try to minimize the confusion, because people had trouble getting communicated to. And if you put out something, it wasn't going to come back. You had to make sure that you were communicating very effectively. Also, be ready for national and international media. They want to tell the story, and that can be really great. But I prioritize local media because my job is to make sure that voters have the information they need to vote. But national media, they help in a whole different way. And so just making sure that you have kind of thought about what your priorities would be in various levels of emergencies. And make sure that all the media outlets are bringing back something to your. So for us, that was a very, very difficult time. But if you prepare and you take care of yourself and your staff, I think that you'll find that you have the power to make things work, that you can inventively solve problems. And we made this election happen despite all these obstacles, and voters really did appreciate it. That was something that was very validating. So when you're in this super stressful situation, you're wondering, you know, why am I doing this? Why did I take this job? Voters appreciate it. Western North Carolina, in fact, edged out the rest of the state in voter turnout.
That's amazing, Kareen.
Yes, so that's what I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I could still hear the emotion in your voice when you were talking about some of what you went through. So I think on behalf of everybody, thank you for for being strong enough to share that story with us. I do want to turn the questions to the rest of the panel. Each of you has a unique kind of background within elections that I think each of you complement one another really well. As you look across the country, and this is for everybody, or you look within your own kind of lane of work, what do you see in terms of overall preparedness with either local jurisdictions or state level jurisdictions that you work with?
TJ, I'll take that one. So I
Love
think,
it.
yes, I think there's 2 or 3 different levels here. One is we all have to be prepared personally, right? Excuse me, if you're going to go into any response, making sure you have something as simple as medication, your glasses, a sweater, right? Some food, snacks. Just it's easy to say, hey, I'm going to go and do this. And after a 17-hour shift, you're tired and hungry, and we have to take care of ourselves. The other thing is that nobody has all the resources. Certainly, none of us on this call have all the resources, and we don't have all the solutions, but we know who does, right? And there's some good examples brought up earlier. Your county EMA, your local EMA, your state EMA. Those organizations are literally designed to know all of the partners who have the stuff you need. So I've had some people say, I'm a staff of 3. I don't have generators. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have radios. That's great. You don't have to, but talk to your local EMA ahead of time. And that's really the other thing is people say, oh, well, I'll call the fire department when I need them. Well, you know what? Maybe call them ahead of time and make sure they have the things that you need and that they know you. I had a local election official say, if I need the sheriff, I'll call 911. And I said, they are not going to know who you are. And you're not going to be calling the sheriff. You'll be calling a dispatcher. And they're like, oh, I didn't really think of that. So I think that's just a few things I definitely want to toss to the other panelists as well. But being prepared does not have to be a monumental lift, right? Start small, build the relationships, and find out who has what you need to persevere.
Yeah, I might just expand or
No, go for
Carolina,
it,
go
Ryan.
ahead.
Go for it, Ryan.
I would just expand a little on what Matt was saying, that considering yourself and also your staff, and in particular some backups in the chain of command so that your response can begin, even if you or one of your key staff becomes unavailable precisely because of the crisis. So think about the things that he talked about also for people who you need to be with you.
Carolina?
That's one of the points that I was going to say, which is you have the perfect plan, and it's probably, let's call this fictitious employee Larry, right? And Larry is like the go-to person. When there's a flood, call Larry. When the deliveries are late, call Larry. When there is, right? So a couple of things happen. What if Larry's home is flooded and he can't come in? Does election stop, or do you have to figure out a different route? So and TJ and Ryan and everybody else, right? So having a good backup. 2, I can't tell you how many times I see like these big, beautiful continuity plans that are 300 pages, but like when the building is burning or the building has been flooded, I don't know how many of your employees are going to run back into the building and be like, but wait, I need to get my, my coup plan. So having ways that everybody knows when you're doing your TTX is like, how are you going to communicate, right? Do you update the phone system to say, hey, our office is closed, we're with the community, and you have all of these things sort of pre-written ahead of time. And God forbid you never need them. But if you do, you know whose job is to do that. And if Larry isn't available, then Ryan's the backup for that voicemail message, right? And having maybe like a digital copy in a safe way that continuity of operations or sections of that coup plan can be reached by your team quickly. And if you have to go analog, and sometimes, I'm looking at some of those pictures, I don't know that Wi-Fi was all that great, and the aftermath, right? So like, how do you go analog? I recently heard something that I thought was strange, but like strangely peculiar and so brilliant, which was there was a county, and TJ, I think you told me about it. There was a county that in the TTX they brought in the ham radio club of a local community, and I was like, ham radio club, and I thought that was brilliant, and I would have never ever ever in my life thought bringing that in. So when you plan TTXs, think broadly. And the last thing I'll say is, a plan is only as good as the people that read it. So sometimes I see some coup plans that are perfectly executed, and you never shared it with your emergency manager or your police department or your fire department or your mayor. So if you don't have buy-in before, I promise you, you're not going to have buy-in when everything is, lopsided. So anyway, good. Coordination is huge.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what you all are saying, and I love that you're able to weave in ham radios. Carolina, that was fantastic. I have to say, election officials are some of the most crafty folks. And so kudos to all the hard work out there and for how you're able to think on your feet in challenging situations. But similar themes to what you've already heard, the two things that kind of stand out in my mind is one, just start small. And everybody's resources are incredibly different nationwide. There's a lot of folks that I've experienced that, to Carolina's point, have amazingly crafted plans and they're beautiful. But there's also jurisdictions that everything's up here and and that's okay, but at the end of the day, you want to try to get that documented. And because what if that person is incapacitated or they retire or whatever it might be? You want to have that redundancy in place and make sure you have access to what the structure of the plan is. And so just starting small is always helpful, knowing who to contact and who are taking on key roles, and then you can build over time. But the other thing is building that muscle memory. Even as something as small, in Pennsylvania, we used to co-locate with our state emergency management agency, and staff are all sometimes going over there for the first time and they don't know where to go. And what if there's an emergency? So you got to start practicing that. And in time, you might recognize, oh, I didn't think about this scenario. And then you can evolve. It's a living document. And so I think building that muscle memory is really essential. So it speeds up that response time and it helps make your operations more effective.
And I think that it's less about the document itself than the process of doing it, because that's what's bringing those people together. That's how it's a tool to make relationships with other people.
Excellent. I am going to launch.
I
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to launch a survey for folks, and then Carolina, go.
Well, just I'd be curious what other folks are doing for coup plans. I heard through the grapevine, maybe at Election Center or something, where there's election officials doing like video versions of their coup plan so they can deploy to their staff. I'm curious, like, what are you hearing? Because that seems like a pretty nifty thing.
Matthew, anything there?
Yeah, I don't yeah, I have a lot of things here. It's not trying to come up with the answer, it's trying to how much time do we have? Thing we do here in our office is before every election, and it's for our staff, but for we do a safety brief, we do an election day operations brief, and a coup brief. We do them all in one so that everyone knows the plan. There's two other things that kind of indirectly answer the question, but I'm glad you asked that. Is one, we recently did last year, we did an exercise. We call it the mock at the sock because it rhymes. But we go to our backup site and we did the mock elections at our backup site. And it was like you said, the familiarity, right? It's not just here's a plan, but let's get people familiar with how to get through the gate and how to get through security and do we have enough MiFi and Wi-Fi and everything else. So instead of just briefing them on it or even I like the idea of a video. We told our staff, we said, hey, we're going. And then we set up not only the mock part for elections, but we had our entire command team come over. We had a rapid response, our election integrity, and we set up a series of conference rooms as if it was election day here and ran them through a series of tasks. And some of the tasks are easy, right? Like log into our system and tell us what you had for breakfast, like just so they could get in and it didn't have to be anything complex. And then just another thing that we do here in Ohio is we have all 88 counties have an election administration plan that's required by law from our office. In the past, they had submitted that and we would check it off. They submitted it. Last year, we updated it with a number of required continuity components. And then we actually built a matrix for our staff to review every single plan. So 88 plans are a couple hundred pages each. It took a while. We went through and we scaled them and sent them back to folks who just kind of filled in the blanks and didn't really put it there. But then we also did something at our summer conference specific for the plan and continuity. And we did a series of regional tabletops, all focused on continuity as well. So it's hard to say, like, there's not one answer, right? As we just did this thing. So we try to hit it from a variety of different angles for our staff and for the boards. and keeping it realistic, right? We didn't want to go zombie apocalypse. We went with some weather, which is realistic. We went with a cyber attack, which is realistic, and just try to get them to buy into the culture to see why it's relevant, rather than jam it down their throats, which I've seen some folks do ineffectively.
Zombie
I
unicorn
would,
apocalypse, Matthew.
That's right.
I would mention one of my favorite quotes from President Eisenhower, who also planned a little operation called D-Day in World War II, who said that plans are useless, but planning is essential. In other words, planning throws all your people into the mindset of what's going to happen. It gets them thinking about responses that may not go on the written plan, but they're in the back of their heads when that crisis hits. So going through planning is maybe more important. The plan isn't really useless. That's an exaggeration, but it gets people exercising those mental muscles that they need when they hit the crisis.
Hey, Ryan, on that point, I know you developed a resource for election folks. Can you talk a little bit about that resource, and I'll put it in the chat?
Sure, I think you might already have put it in the chat, but we developed the 60-minute guide to emergency response for election officials. It's both a toolkit and a handbook that talks about the toolkit. The toolkit is a bunch of templates for a phone list that you'll need, ways of categorizing your response, and that I think is what's really critical about it. We believe that emergency response that can feel like this big chaos is really just the sum of a number of smaller emergencies that you already know how to deal with. And that running yourself through this process of saying, okay, how would I handle this for polling places? How would I handle this for election judges? Ultimately helps you organize your response when otherwise, as Corrine and her poster mentioned earlier, when that panic response can take over. It's no, don't panic. Just here's something for you to do. Here's something for my election judge coordinator to do. So this toolkit gives you the opportunity, a way of thinking through these things that helps eliminate that sense of chaos that can hit. And again, the 60-minute idea, the idea is that in 60 minutes, you can't sit down and have contingencies for everything that may hit you. However, you can have the start of a plan. You've already thought through the kinds of things you may need to do. You've got your list of the people who you need at hand in your office, the 5 or 6, some of whom might be in another county office, but they're your confidant. They're a wise person who can help you in that crisis. You've got the names of the emergency manager and various other first responders and people with resources that you'll need. And you've started to think about, when am I going to sit down? When am I going to talk to them? When am I going to make sure that we're on the same page? What we suggest midway through the guide is 60 minutes is not going to be enough, but right now, think about when your next 60 minutes is going to be. Don't just put it off in the distant future. Put it on the calendar 2 to 4 months ahead from now, so that you continue this process and you will get there.
As we're thinking about developing partnerships and the best ways for doing that, Matthew, you mentioned tabletop exercises. In addition to tabletop exercises, and please talk about those, anybody who's on the panel, what are some other ways to kind of foster partnerships that have proven to be effective?
Yeah, I think just getting together at the local level, right? Getting together, especially before a big election, inviting all your partners, have some pizza, food, coffee, whatever. Food brings us all together, right? One of our counties right before the November election said, "Hey, we're going to bring in." I'm pretty sure they had their the mayor's office, prosecutor, local PD, sheriffs, obviously the Board of Elections. They even brought in the Red Cross, their county MA, the utilities, and a few others. And they said, let's go around and make sure we're all prepared for a variety of scenarios. We gave a safety security type brief. And they didn't even do a tabletop per se. They just said, what's everyone here worried about? And they kind of let everyone throw out their own scenario. And I think when you really say it's hey, we have a storm coming for the tabletop, let's talk through the questions, people will zone out at some point. But if you say, hey, what are you worried about? And someone's like, I don't know if my gas station is going to be open, or I don't know if we have enough bollards or whatever, and that gives them the buy-in to really grow there. Another thing, just along with tabletops, I like taking it further than a tabletop and doing a drill or a small functional. And I know those are terms, right, that can get confusing, but just run through a few things because it is that muscle memory, right? It is that comfort level. When we went over and did our mock at the sock exercise, people were just like, wow, like I saw it, like I felt it. We didn't have enough printers, and that put pressure on me, but I feel comfortable now that we know. And it really went beyond the conversation and kind of went hands-on with them. And then with the partnerships, just one other thing to add, and somebody said about going to the state EOC on election day, we actually have reps from the state EOC come to our office as well as Ohio Homeland Security, and we embed them with us. So that way, if anything happens, we're not out of the office, located somewhere else, but we have that direct line, and we exercise with them as well. And of course, it all comes down to partnerships, right? I'm sure everybody here knows that if you can just call the right person because you know them already, you've already exchanged business cards, you've had coffee, you've been at an exercise with them, that saves so much time when time is very valuable during a response.
Matthew, in the Q&A, we have a Matthew McChrystal fan club. Matthew McChrystal has helped us in real life emergency planning, not just on paper.
Thank you, Heather.
Looking at Carolina, Mike, anything to add there on the value of those types of exercises or other things?
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree with everything that Matthew has laid out. And sometimes I often feel like that's the hardest part is getting people in the room and find any excuse to connect with them if you don't already have that relationship. And if you do, see how you can make it stronger. But finding coffee or trying to see are there opportunities to collaborate or cross train, whatever that might be. But I'm a huge fan of building partnership groups or work groups that can help foster resilience or add capacity to your staff. We went down this journey in Pennsylvania in 2018. We formed the initial iteration of the state election security work group, but that's a repeatable model that can very much be carried out on the local level with the local equivalent. So we had National Guard in the room, the State Emergency Management Agency, we had our state CISO, a whole bunch of people from various perspectives. And that was the most powerful aspect of that was getting that insight and perspective from their expertise. And, so to Matthew's point, we would ask those questions like, what are you worried about coming up? And they would say something we might not have been anticipating. But that collaboration in the room and building that rapport actually helps strengthen our response over time. And that's where the statewide HISN dashboard came out in Pennsylvania and that collaborative discussion where we worked with emergency management and they actually, we cultivated our own statewide HISN dashboard and it pulled in data from tons of agencies like transportation, with our election data, with incidents that were cropping up. And it was a visual that anyone across the state that was an EMA, a county election director, IT director, that was our central organizing point where we can drill down information, but they could report up and we had statewide visibility on what was happening. But it also led to other opportunities. We had a lot of rapport under our belts for about 2 years. So when COVID hit, as election officials, we can only go so far with logistics and distribution, especially when it came to PPE. So emergency management was a critical partner who took that on for us because they already have a lot of that distribution figured out. And so they housed the PPE material, they distributed it to the counties. We were more of a liaison to see what they needed. So if you get those people in the room, over time, that partnership can mature and it goes into other areas that can add so many additional benefits to elections outside of emergency response.
That's excellent. Carolina, anything to add there or Corrine, Carolina, Ryan?
I mean, the only thing I might want to say here is, again, and it goes back to the plans, like, what if all the things that you normally would go to are offline for whatever reason, right? Like, what if, I don't know, what if like half the county loses power? Like there is not enough generators in Home Depot to power, right? So like as you think through things and you've heard Matthew and Mike and everyone else talk about planning, it's also like repetition because conditions change. Maybe your budget got smaller. It's not a presidential year, you have a couple million less, right? Or like maybe there's a new development, a new construction, and so there's cranes all around your building. Well, that's a new risk that you didn't have before. So I think even if you meet once a year and it's a potluck or not, like do it more frequently. Like I actually have heard some election offices that their staff meeting, and it doesn't happen every week, but like they make it as part of their staff meetings where they have like mini TTXs throughout the year to keep the noggin fresh. Like, okay, but like how would we adjust this plan? Oh man, we haven't updated that section since 2006. Maybe we should.
Karina, Ryan?
Yeah, I was just gonna say there are two other relationship builders that came to mind when we were talking, and one is remembering from an elections perspective, right? We are very similar with emergency management in that a thing happens and there is no control over that timeline. And that you're gonna work long hours, there is tons of overtime, kind of connecting with emergency management on that level. Like, I understand you. And then there are other ways where an elections office can offer. Like sometimes emergency managers get credits for doing TTXs, so try to organize it at a time that it works for them so that they're getting something out of that. And we're all ICS trained now. So if it wasn't an election time, we could have gone and helped during that period. And then something that I think we should never overlook is saying thank you. After the event, don't forget to write a card, call them, send cookies to the office, or whatever you think to make sure that they know that you appreciate it. Solidifies those relationships.
Ryan, anything to add?
Well, Corinne said some of this, but just that idea that an election office at a time of a community-wide emergency that may not directly affect them often has people who might be interested and available with skills to volunteer. And we've heard of offices that help staff the call center or that may help organize the sandbag line. So other ways to get yourself in emergency management settings so that you start to learn the terminology, the mental frameworks that they use, which may otherwise become confusing in a crisis because you use a term differently than they do.
That is an excellent segue because Ryan mentioned terminology, Karine mentioned ICS. So I want to ask, focusing on Matthew, who again is our zombie unicorn. I took a few emergency management related classes in grad school. I have a very baseline understanding that emergency managers love their vernacular, just like election officials do. What are the practices? What are the things that you see folks doing to kind of bridge that gap between election officials and emergency managers so they're not talking past each other or not communicating in ways that they don't understand? Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, it's a good question. My gut reaction was tell everybody to take the free online, independent study courses for incident command, but that's one, unrealistic. A lot of folks may not take that, and two, it's not specifically for elections officials. However, I've seen a lot of election officials' offices who kind of organize in a pseudo incident command structure. They've seen it work, right? The structure works for reporting. To your point earlier about continuity. Oh, thank you for dropping that in there. Yeah, what if Larry is not there, right? Who fills in that role, and the structure can kind of help in that aspect. I think the other thing is talking common language, just plain talk, right? Plain speak. Get rid of all of those acronyms because man, we all have so many acronyms, and you'd think they're individual to you or unique to you. I can tell you, I went to a DoD or whatever they're called now. I went to a federal military installation this morning for an exercise, and they had a whole new slew of acronyms on top of the acronyms I already knew that existed for them. And it really slowed down some things for people to explain that. So at a high level, right, just talk like a normal person. And it's easy to say and hard to do sometimes, but just drop the ego, right? It doesn't matter what your title is and how many cool letters you have after your name. It's, hey, we're all here to help each other. This is what this means, not I know incident command and you don't, right? We need to work within a similar framework. And that's actually not hard to do if we just talk to each other like people.
Kareen, anything to that kind of through your experience as someone who has, I am sure, lived through incident command speak from lots of different participating agencies?
Yeah, I think Matthew talks, in one direction, emergency management to elections, but you are absolutely right. Elections also has all of our acronyms. So we have an acronym sheet that we have kept track of, which we keep adding to, and we add that to our emergency line.
That's amazing. And to Jennifer's question, I put the FEMA ICS 100 course on incident command systems in the chat, but I will be sure to add that to the follow-up email as well. I do want to turn to peer networks and associations, even outside organizations, focusing on Carolina, who is the leader of one of these associations. What role do you think they play or you play in socializing some of these ideas, getting folks into a posture of preparedness?
I proudly wear the super connector badge next to my business card at all times. Being in Miami-Dade County for 15 years, we thought, wow, I've seen it all. We have hurricanes, we have, global, interest in our elections. And, we would travel across the state and look at each other's facilities. And so I thought for sure I had seen everything. How was I wrong? How little did I know once I started seeing just like different cities, traveling to Chicago and Boston and LA. And anyway, we all have different skill sets. There are people that used to be professors. There are people that used to be logistics people or teachers or all these things. So like our brains work differently. And so we figure out solutions to different things so interestingly. And so sort of like one of the focus at Pledge is just, how do we bring people together? How do we learn as much as possible of all the cool things happening? How do we package it in a way that's easy to share? And if that should strike, a thought for you and your team, so be it. I was so impressed by Corinne. We had her on a webinar, and she mentioned something about having like a wrist tracker. It stayed with me, and by the way, I'm still trying to make that a reality, Corinne. So as soon as I have a lead, I'm going to call you, because that's what we do. We talk, we compare. We usually start with, oh, TJ has different laws. Like we're just
That's right.
different, right? But you find that, yeah, the thing that you have to implement is different. The journey in discovering how to implement it and how to have flawless elections each and every time is so similar, right? And so that's, I think, my role. I view it as like, just like, how do we collect information and package it so that we know what the latest trends are, but like also what does ingenuity look like, and not just when there's like a cat 3, 4, or 5 heading your way.
Kareen, anything on, I imagine, I mean, I know the former executive director of the North Carolina State Board of Elections, Karen Brinson Bell. I think in the same way that you acted heroically through Helene, she did similarly at the state level. But during Helene, and as you were recovering or administering the elections in the immediate aftermath, how did you rely on peer networks? I mean, were you looking to the folks in Eastern North Carolina? Were you getting the support that you needed? What did that look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And really, we did it all. So we started very small. First, it was, where are the people in my office? Gather those. We have our own office emergency plan. So we were ready to work on that level. Then we tried to broaden out. Now we're at the county level. We start to learn this is bigger than the county. This is a regional event. The the emergency management had already started working with states in their work. But in elections in North Carolina and some other states too, there's levels. So we're state operated and county implemented. And so once we were able to get contact with the state, then they could initiate their state emergency management for election specific events. And I think many of us know Karen Brinsonville, that was a passion of hers. And so that was a really strong connection that we had. And that ended up being instrumental because, like I said, this was a very large disaster. There, you know, we talk about porta potties too much, but that was a resource that was exhausted. They were coming in from New York, right? You need that coordination from across the country. I think we saw that in COVID-19. There was no place that was not affected. So you have to know how to scale up and figure out that level that isn't overtaxed, because you are regionally, what do you do after that? And then things start getting easier. So making sure you can't have all of those connections first. So you have to make sure that you know who the key players are and have a way to give them the information so that they understand the situation.
That's excellent. For this next question, and I do want to turn to the Q&A after this, so folks, please continue to put questions in the Q&A. On today, we have 2 folks from Florida. We have 1 person from North Carolina who just went through an emergency. I'll put us in one bucket, and then maybe unfairly, and you all are welcome to push back on this, but we have someone from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Illinois. I think in terms of possible emergencies or recently experienced emergencies, with the exception of COVID, 2 separate kind of pieces of this conversation. So to the folks who aren't from Florida or North Carolina, how do you talk about emergency preparedness? How do you get people in the mindset to begin to prepare for emergencies when experiencing one may feel like getting struck by lightning, or may feel more abstract than other folks across the country experience?
Yeah,
Right. I would
go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
or I would just say, yeah, it's and here it's not so much that people are complacent as that they feel that there are other more compelling challenges that they face. Getting past that, it's interesting how COVID was this massive disruption, hit basically 3 days before our election, our primary election. And yet people mentally space that off as, well, that was a one-off thing that, you know, they go directly from it can't happen here to that can't happen again. But what we actually know is in 2003, there was a blackout that affected much of the eastern United States for 4 to 12 hours, and in some cases longer. Last year, there was the CrowdStrike incident that sent, both major airlines crashing, not crashing literally, but their systems crashing for, in some cases, several days, and had lots of other businesses unable to process things. These kind of things, the specific incident doesn't happen maybe once every 100 years, but in general, these kind of incidents can happen anywhere. And so I think giving people a few steps they can take now to start thinking through it, letting them know. I really appreciate when Carolina says, hey, there aren't enough generators in Home Depot. She's right. But on the other hand, getting 2 generators, if you don't have any, is a huge step for you. You'll be able to power your warehouse. You'll be able to get things out of it. You'll be able to prepare your voting machines at a time when otherwise you might not be able to. So I think just getting past that, oh my God, I really need to recruit more election judges, to spend an hour today and spend another hour in 3 months, and you'll have the framework of how to operate when something happens.
And tailoring off of that, so it's not if but when, right? I tell everybody, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit with a cyber attack or ransomware. There's going to be a power outage. It's in Ohio. The one great and not great thing is maybe it will be 80 degrees on election day, and maybe it'll be snowing, right? So we've all in Ohio, we've lived through blizzards. We did have in 2019 the Memorial Day tornadoes. We had more tornado warnings in a 4-hour period than in a 7 year period. Typically, it was devastating. We had something similar on a smaller scale last year that did actually impact elections. But we know we're going to get that. And so that's what I try to talk to people, right? We're not planning for hurricanes necessarily or volcanoes, but we know there are certain things that impact Ohio, and tornadoes is one of them. We can't control weather, right? We know there's going to be a power outage, a cyber attack. And then I kind of start putting it in just like, are you ready for a 12-hour power outage? Like, that's not a very long time in all reality. And it's also forever when you're in it and it's impacting your critical operations. So I try to scale it from some, hey, it could happen up here. It could be North Carolina. It could be Hurricane Helene. And I hate that that happened to y'all, but I'm glad people can see like, hey, big things happen at bad times. Narrow it all the way down to what if you don't have some of the basic needs. One thing that's important is I tell people, talk to your local county officials, to your first responders, because they know what those hazards are, right? That's their job, is to have a HIRA and a THIRA. I recently had Board of Elections say, well, our fire engines from the fire department, they can just plug into the building and act like a mobile generator. And the fire chief was in the meeting and he said, actually, with all the LED technology and everything else, we're not building our fire engines are not being built with the same capacity to act as a generator because they don't need that anymore. Now they just have a little Honda, what's it called, the i2100 or whatever, that they can power everything off of. So it's important to remember that just because we had a blizzard in 1970, we are not going to respond the same way today, right? We're not going to respond the same way today we responded to even something just 2 years ago, because technology, communication, everything else. And so we really have to be realistic with what those hazards are. And I think making it realistic on a personal level allows us to then look at a county level.
Mike?
I mean, I think those are all great points, and I was just thinking throughout that if there was sort of branching off, but was kind of leaving a thought on what is something that I think would be a great priority to navigate some of this, because it is hard to plan for all these things, and your response does change over time. But I think if nothing else is one of the I think most impactful things outside of the relationship aspect is I really want people to consider having a go kit ready and having those essential documents you might need or methods of communication, contact lists. Doesn't have to be fancy, but it's something that you can get up and going in a pinch, you can carry with you, and you might have the pieces in multiple locations, maybe digital form, backup in printed form, but something that you can quickly grab. So when the stuff does happen, you can, start pulling out what you need to and acting on it. If it is a major event, then, you have what you need in front of you.
Definitely. Going back to one of the points that Matthew made about snow, Carolina, can you imagine if Miami even got like a 1/10 of an inch of snow and what would happen down there?
Have you seen us when it's 50 degrees and the fur coats come out?
So
Well, you guys, the fur coats in Miami come out at 85. I don't know how people do it.
It's passion. But you know what? I'll tell you what, I think Matt was saying something earlier, or maybe it was Ryan, about, like you make plans and you make plans, right? And look, 9 times out of 10, the thing that happened was not the thing that you had planned for. But because you have a good structure, when, this happens, Mike does this and Ryan does this, and, we educate the community this way, and we call, these folks at the news station, like you have a good system. And you guys might be wondering, what is Carolina talking about? In Denver, there was a voting location that, I don't know, like 30 minutes before it was go live time, the power went out. And we're like, oh my God, what's happening? Well, a mouse started eating the cable that took out the power. And guess what? It took hours. And I bet you, I will give $5 to the person that says that is in their coup plan, right? But the idea is you have these conversations not to check off the 30,000 things that could go wrong. It's who do I need to connect? And I think the moment we start thinking of coup plans and TTX is less about, I have a hurricane plan, I have a this plan, I have a snow plan. It's more like, it's an exercise in thinking what else, what's outside of my peripheral vision. And I that's why I think you should do it as often as possible, not just like once every 10 years.
Yeah, definitely more than once every 10 years.
If I can
Uh,
jump on that just real
yeah,
quick,
definitely.
speaking my love language and passion here. So, yeah, so Mike Tyson says, right, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face. But Mike Tyson also trains all the time and knows how to dodge and bob and weave and fight. And so, yeah, it's I mean, they say the same thing, right, in the military. Everybody has a plan until you start getting shot at, or however that saying goes. Yeah, it's planning, which Ryan, you said earlier. And to your point, it doesn't matter if it's a mouse or a cyber attack or whatever, right? It's that creativity, the solution, knowing how to respond to make sure everything keeps going. So I tell people you can't plan for everything, but your plan should allow you to pivot for the response. I think that's key.
I love that we've had a Dwight Eisenhower quote. We've had Mike Tyson. This is excellent. We've only got 4 minutes left, so I do want to turn to the very last question. Mike, you kind of already gave yours, so you'll go last so you can give another one and have an idea for it. You mentioned go bags as one small practical step election offices can take tomorrow or today as they get off the call to make them more resilient for the next election cycle. To everybody, what is that one thing that folks can do to put them in a better position?
I'm going to be a little facetious and say my go bag is my communications kit, like my holding statements, my all the things that I need to activate, so I don't have to think about it. I could just hand it off to somebody and make it go. And for those of you that are not elected, that are appointed, and you need your mayor, your comms, like all these people to approve it, write it ahead of time, get it done, lock it down, so that way if you ever have to activate, it's in your proverbial go bag.
I think that
Um,
election professionals are naturally preppers. So we personally were really prepared because we don't get to go home during an election anyway. So we had we're open to go bags. That is definitely something. I think something that was really helpful in my office is that I really support mental wellness. And so we had a pretty deep well of psychological resiliency resources to pull from. The reason that I have made that culture in our department is because it's really tense during election time. I call it building social capital because you know you're going to burn it. You know that we're going to be not so nice to each other. But we can't shut down. We have to keep going. And so that is something I absolutely recommend doing. And it is something that helps people in all of their lives. So it's an easy thing to see.
Ryan, go ahead.
Some of us on the panel have been taking part in a working group over the last few months, and one of the compelling quotes that came out of that was from Kira Mendez at the Alliance for Election Excellence, who said, "The election office that has an excellent emergency readiness plan is often one that faced an emergency without a plan." I'm here for all of those of you who might be in that situation, who might be a little bit panicked just from this, just from hearing, oh my God, I need to plan for that and that and that. My one step you can take today is get your calendar out. Get your calendar out. And if you haven't called your emergency manager or some of your other first responders, call them today, not to talk for an hour, but to say, hey, I want to meet. I want to meet for 15 minutes sometime in the next month. Get your calendar out and schedule 1 hour when you can sit down either with our toolkit that we've posted or with another template and start to fill in the blanks so that you do have the framework of a plan, and then schedule that second meeting sometime in the future.
Matthew, and then Mike with his second first thing. Go ahead, Matthew.
Where to begin, right? I think just think of some of this like a seatbelt. And unless you want me to answer the go bag question, I think it's the final advice here, right? Is it's a seatbelt. I wear a seatbelt every day, not because I plan on getting into an accident, but because when I get into an accident, because somebody else was driving wrong or whatever, that I'm not as hurt and I can still get out of the car and function. And I think that's really the mindset of Ryan, like you said, this discussion may cause panic. It honestly might. And it doesn't have to be that daunting, that overwhelming. Start small. Think of the smallest thing that could happen and just address that, right? And kind of build that confidence. I don't pay my health insurance because I hope to get sick, and I don't pay my homeowner's insurance because I hope a tree falls on it. And so when I spend $100 a month on one more prepper thing for myself, it's maybe I never need to eat this emergency food, but when I'm hungry, everyone around me will be grateful that I brought some extra Snickers and Clif Bars to the office.
Matthew, knowing you for the hour that I've known you now, I imagine that you just eat MREs kind of normally, but
I actually have until about 10 o'clock tonight if you guys want to talk go bags. So
go ahead, Mike, with the final.
I'd say my second number one item is plan for the zombie apocalypse. Just kidding, but if anyone has that in your plan, I would love to see it. But my number two, and I think it was Matthew who mentioned this earlier, outside of having a little kit ready to go, is test the pieces. Often you don't always have the time for that. Things change over time, so we found out ways when we would go to our alternate site, the network connection wasn't working anymore, so those things happen. So just make sure you test your pieces and the components that you put together so you can iron out those wrinkles before you need it.
Amazing, amazing. We are at the end of our very excellent conversation today. Thank you, obviously, to the panelists for joining us, sharing your experiences, sharing your stories, sharing your advice. Resources that have been shared today will be included in the follow-up thank you email. I look forward to seeing everybody at a future elections group webinar discussion. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye, everybody.